Tonight, we explore the haunting story of a town consumed by a fire that refuses to die. This is the story of Centralia, a once thriving community slowly erased by an invisible enemy beneath its streets, leaving behind only smoke, silence, and memory. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us keep telling forgotten stories that deserve to be heard. Now settle in, get comfortable, and join us as we journey into the heart of a town where the fire still burns, long after the people have gone. In the early 1960s, Centralia, Pennsylvania, was the kind of small town that felt almost untouched by time. Nestled among the gentle, rolling hills of the Appalachian Mountains, it was a place where everybody knew everybody else. Rows of tidy houses lined the streets. Children played baseball in grassy lots. Coal miners, the backbone of the town for generations, gathered in diners for coffee after long shifts underground. At first glance, Centralia was ordinary, peaceful, even. But beneath its streets and backyards, an invisible danger had been waiting for years. An ancient network of abandoned coal mines crisscrossed the earth below, shafts and tunnels left behind by decades of extraction. And deep within those tunnels, the fuel that had once built Centralia's fortune still waited, dry, brittle, and flammable. The town's connection to coal ran deep. Since the mid-1800s, anthracite mining had shaped every aspect of life here. It had brought jobs, prosperity, and a sense of identity. It had also left behind a labyrinth of forgotten caverns, unseen and largely ignored, slowly aging in the dark. On May 27, 1962, something changed. It began with the town's landfill, a modest dump site located in an old strip mine pit just outside the downtown area. In preparation for Memorial Day festivities, officials decided to clean it up. And as they had done before, they set fire to the trash to burn it down to a manageable size. But this time, something went wrong. The flames crept deeper into the ground than expected, slipping into a hidden seam of coal that lay exposed beneath the dump. A slow, smoldering fire took hold, invisible at first, but relentless. The townspeople extinguished the surface flames easily enough. But underground, the coal itself had begun to burn. The fire found oxygen pockets in the old mine shafts. It spread in every direction, threading its way beneath Centralia, feeding off the endless veins of anthracite left behind by generations of miners. No one noticed at first. Life went on. Children played. Miners commuted to the nearby collieries. Neighbors attended Sunday services and local fairs. But over the weeks and months that followed, subtle signs began to emerge. A strange, acrid smell, like burning rubber, sometimes drifted through town on the wind. Patches of earth grew unexpectedly warm underfoot. Thin ribbons of smoke occasionally curled from cracks in the ground. Still, most people shrugged it off. Fires underground were not unheard of in coal country. They often burned themselves out after a few months, forgotten as quickly as they had begun. There was no sense of urgency. Not yet. The flames were hidden, out of sight, out of mind. But beneath Centralia's streets, something ancient and unstoppable had awakened. A fire that would not die easily. A fire that would slowly, methodically consume the town from the inside out. And in time, it would transform Centralia from a bustling little community into something else entirely. A ghost town, a cautionary tale, and a testament to how even the smallest spark can alter the course of history forever. The residents of Centralia had lit a fire to clear away the trash. They didn't know they had also lit the fuse for their town's slow, fiery destruction. As summer gave way to fall in 1962, life in Centralia continued outwardly as it always had. The churches filled on Sunday mornings. Children raced their bicycles through the streets. The aroma of coal smoke, long a familiar scent, drifted lazily from chimneys as autumn brought a welcome chill to the air. But beneath the surface, the underground fire was spreading. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it chewed through abandoned tunnels and ancient coal seams, seeking fresh fuel and hidden pockets of air. The network of old mines, largely unmapped and poorly understood, provided a perfect labyrinth for the fire to travel. At first, the signs remained subtle. Small sinkholes appeared in vacant lots. Patches of dead grass and withered trees marred the otherwise neat landscape. Basement walls grew warm to the touch. Some residents noticed a strange mist clinging to the low spots on chilly mornings, mist that smelled sharply of sulfur and burned the throat when breathed in. Still, most people dismissed the warnings. Coal country had always lived with danger: cave-ins, gas leaks, explosions. This was simply another hazard to be managed, another nuisance that would eventually pass. Town officials called in the State Department of Mines and Mineral Industries to investigate. Tests confirmed what a few had already suspected: the landfill fire had ignited a coal seam. The fire was growing, slowly but steadily, beneath the town. A plan was proposed: a quick excavation to dig out and isolate the burning section, cutting it off from fresh coal and oxygen. But funding was limited. Permits delayed action. The bureaucracy moved slowly, bogged down by red tape and a lack of urgency. By the time serious efforts began in late 1962, the fire had already slipped beyond the reach of simple solutions. Efforts to dig trenches and pour slurry barriers into the earth, thick mixtures of water, clay, and sand meant to smother the fire, failed again and again. The fire always found a way around. New cracks opened. New pockets ignited. Winter arrived. Snow blanketed the town, and for a while, the strange events faded from view beneath a soft, white silence. But beneath the frozen streets, the fire never slept. It smoldered and advanced, inch by inch, year by year, growing stronger, hungrier, more deeply entwined with the very foundations of Centralia. In the meantime, life continued. Miners clocked in at nearby collieries. Children bundled up against the cold and made snow angels in fields that, unbeknownst to them, were hollowed and heating from below. There was no single moment when disaster announced itself with trumpets and fanfare. Instead, the destruction of Centralia was a slow burn, a creeping dread that unfolded over years, almost invisibly, until it became impossible to ignore. For now, though, the town still hoped. Hoped that winter would kill the fire. Hoped that government agencies would find a solution. Hoped that Centralia could endure, as it had endured so much before. But hope alone could not smother what burned beneath their feet. The earth was restless. And soon, it would begin to crack open, and the people of Centralia would face a choice they never wanted to make: stay and risk everything, or leave the only home they had ever known. By the early 1970s, the signs of danger in Centralia were no longer whispers in the background. They were loud, unavoidable warnings. Cracks began appearing in the streets, jagged tears in the asphalt that belched wisps of smoke and the sharp, stinging scent of sulfur. Basements filled with strange, noxious gases. Residents noticed the temperature of the ground itself, in some places, warm enough to melt the soles of shoes. The fire had spread far beyond the original landfill site. Beneath the town, a slow-motion catastrophe was unfolding. In 1972, Centralia's troubles gained new attention. Gas station owner John Coddington discovered something alarming. While checking the underground fuel tanks at his station, he noticed the gasoline inside seemed unusually warm. When he measured it with a thermometer, the reading came back at 172 degrees Fahrenheit. It wasn't just the ground anymore, it was everything. The realization sent shockwaves through the town council and the wider community. Suddenly, the fire wasn't a distant threat lurking under empty lots. It was heating the very fuel that powered cars and trucks, lying in tanks beneath the town center. Emergency meetings were held. Experts were called in again: geologists, engineers, state officials. Their findings were grim. The fire was massive, growing, and far beyond any easy solution. Estimates suggested that it could continue burning for decades, possibly even centuries, fueled by the nearly endless anthracite veins under Centralia. Evacuation was discussed for the first time, whispered, tentatively, then louder. But leaving wasn't a simple decision. Centralia was more than a cluster of houses. It was home, a place where generations had lived and died, where families were bound together by history, churches, traditions, and the stubborn pride of coal country. Many residents refused to believe that the fire would win. They had survived harsh winters, economic downturns, and the collapse of the coal industry itself. Surely they could survive this too. And so, for the most part, life went on. Children still attended the local schools. Mass was still held at St. Ignatius Church on Sunday mornings. Families still gathered for birthdays and weddings, sharing laughter and stubborn hope even as the ground beneath them shifted and smoked. But the fire was patient. It didn't need to rush. Every day, every month, every year, it ate a little more of Centralia from the inside out. It hollowed the earth. It poisoned the air. It transformed quiet neighborhoods into unsettling landscapes of sagging houses and steaming cracks. And then, one afternoon in February 1981, something happened that would finally shatter any remaining illusions that Centralia could survive unchanged. An event that would make the fire terrifyingly, undeniably real for everyone. And it would center around a boy, a backyard, and a hole that opened up where none should have been. The ground was no longer just cracking. It was giving way. On February 14, 1981, 12-year-old Todd Domboski was playing in his grandmother's backyard on South Street in Centralia. It was a chilly, gray afternoon. The snow still clung stubbornly to the ground, and the cold air carried the faint, acrid tang that everyone in town had learned to live with, the smell of sulfur from the invisible fire below. Todd was doing what any boy his age might do, stomping through the yard, kicking up clumps of snow, exploring. There was nothing unusual about it. Until the ground opened beneath him. Without warning, the earth gave way. Todd fell through a gaping hole that hadn't been there moments before, a hole nearly 4 feet wide and over 100 feet deep. The world became a blur of falling dirt and rushing, choking heat. The void wasn't just a simple sinkhole. It was a direct connection to the inferno raging below Centralia. From deep inside the earth, toxic gases and superheated air billowed upward, burning Todd's face and filling his mouth and nose. For a terrifying moment, he clung to the roots of a tree that had been exposed by the collapse, his hands slipping, his feet dangling over an abyss. If the roots had broken, if he had lost his grip for even a few seconds longer, he would have fallen to his death, swallowed by the burning void beneath his hometown. Luckily, Todd's cousin Eric Wolfgang, who had been nearby, heard the boy's screams. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, grabbing Todd's arms and hauling him out of the hole just in time. The story spread through Centralia like wildfire. It was the nightmare that everyone had secretly feared, the moment when the ground itself betrayed the people who trusted it. This wasn't just smoke or strange smells anymore. The earth was collapsing, alive with unseen danger. Officials sealed off the hole, and a fresh wave of inspections began. Scientists measured deadly levels of carbon monoxide rising from the fissure. They confirmed that the ground temperature was hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit just a few feet below the surface. It was clear, Centralia was no longer safe. Not for children. Not for families. Not for anyone. For many residents, Todd's near-death experience was the breaking point. Discussions about evacuation, once whispered cautiously, became loud demands. The fire was no longer an abstract threat. It was real, immediate. And it was only getting worse. In the months that followed, pressure mounted on local, state, and federal authorities to act. No longer could the government delay, debate, or hope the fire would burn itself out. The survival of Centralia itself was now in question. Could the town be saved? Or was it already too late? A town built on coal, destined to be destroyed by the very force that had given it life? The answer would not come easily. It would divide neighbors, split families, and leave deep wounds that would last for generations. And as the fire continued to burn silently beneath their feet, the people of Centralia faced a future filled with painful decisions. Stay and risk death. Or leave and lose everything they had ever known. By the late 1980s, Centralia was transforming. Block after block sat silent and abandoned. Houses that once bustled with life were now boarded up, windows shattered by wind and time. Streetlights stood crooked and rusted, flickering only when storms rolled overhead. The fire beneath the town never paused. Every month, new sinkholes appeared. Cracks split sidewalks and roads, some wide enough for a man to slip into if he wasn't careful. Smoke and steam vented from fissures in the earth, carrying the acrid stench of burning coal, an invisible river of poison that rose in silent waves. Wild plants and scraggly trees began to reclaim the streets. Nature, indifferent to the fire and the memories buried under the soil, moved back in. In 1992, Pennsylvania Governor Robert P. Casey made it official. He invoked eminent domain over all remaining properties in Centralia. Any residents who remained were now considered illegal squatters, tenants of a town that no longer legally existed. Still, a handful of people refused to leave. These few, stubborn souls clung to what was left, not out of foolishness, but out of fierce loyalty to their past, their families, their land. They lived among the ruins. They endured the occasional gas leak scares, the sudden road collapses, the endless gray smoke rising from the ground. For them, Centralia wasn't just a place. It was a memory made tangible, a life etched into every cracked brick and broken curb. The town's landmarks began to vanish. The Centralia post office closed. The municipal building fell silent. Even St. Ignatius Church, the heart of the community for over a century, was demolished, its cross removed, its walls torn down stone by stone. Only the cemetery remained untouched, a silent testimony to those who had once built the town from nothing, now resting above the fire's slow march. Tourists began to appear, drawn by the bizarre allure of a living ghost town. They wandered the cracked streets, snapping photos of the steaming ground and abandoned houses. Some came seeking legends, stories of hauntings, curses, secret tunnels. But the true horror of Centralia wasn't found in ghost stories. It was found in the silence. In the way the earth shifted underfoot. In the way a once thriving town could vanish, not in an instant, but in slow, painful erosion. By the mid-1990s, the town's population had dwindled to fewer than a dozen. The official zip code, 17927, was revoked. Centralia was removed from maps and highway signs, an erasure as deliberate as it was heartbreaking. Yet, through it all, the fire burned. Steady. Unseen. Eternal. The town above it faded, but the inferno below continued its silent conquest, carving caverns and corridors deep beneath the scarred land. The residents who stayed behind lived with the knowledge that the ground might betray them at any moment. But they stayed anyway, defying time, government orders, and the slow creep of oblivion. Centralia wasn't just dying. It was being erased, one broken building, one cracked road, one lost memory at a time. And as the last survivors looked out over the steaming, empty landscape, they knew. They were witnessing the final chapter of a place once filled with light and laughter, now reduced to ash and smoke. As the 1990s turned into the new millennium, Centralia was a shadow of its former self. Where once rows of tidy homes had stood, only broken foundations remained. The streets, once busy with children, parades, and the rhythm of daily life, were now little more than crumbling paths disappearing into fields of tall grass and scrub trees. And yet a few residents remained, stubborn, resilient, and determined. They called themselves the holdouts. Some had spent their entire lives in Centralia. Others had built their homes with their own hands, raising families, weathering decades of change. To them, abandoning Centralia was unthinkable, no matter how many court orders, officials, or danger signs the government threw at them. These residents fought a lonely battle, year after year. They battled legal pressure, facing eviction notices and demolition crews. They battled the environment, enduring the ever-present risks of toxic gases and unstable ground. They battled loneliness, living in a town where the nearest neighbor might be half a mile away. But most of all, they battled the slow erosion of memory. Each collapsed building, each removed street sign, each destroyed landmark was another wound, another piece of Centralia that disappeared forever. Still, the holdouts clung fiercely to what remained. They tended their gardens. They decorated their front porches at Christmas. They shoveled snow from driveways that led nowhere. They lived in defiance of the fire, the government, and time itself. In 2013, after decades of lawsuits and negotiations, the state of Pennsylvania reached a settlement with the final handful of residents. They would be allowed to live out their lives in Centralia. When they died, their properties would be seized and the remaining structures demolished. It was a bittersweet victory. The holdouts had earned the right to stay. But they knew that once they were gone, Centralia's last flicker of life would vanish with them. Today, only a few homes remain standing among the skeletal streets. No schools. No stores. No post office. Only memories. Visitors who drive through Centralia now are greeted by long, empty stretches of cracked road, fields of wildflowers, and the occasional wisp of smoke curling into the sky. The most famous landmark, ironically, is not a building at all but a road, graffiti highway, an abandoned stretch of old Route 61 that became a massive, colorful canvas for street artists and tourists, a strange, living monument to a town's slow collapse. Though even graffiti highway has since been covered over with dirt to discourage trespassers. But to the holdouts, and to the descendants of those who once called Centralia home, the town is not just a cautionary tale. It is a testament. A testament to perseverance, to stubbornness, to the deep and often painful bonds between people and the land they call home. Centralia burned beneath their feet. But it never burned away their memories. And even as the streets faded and the ground shifted, the spirit of those who lived there, and refused to abandon it, lingered. Silent. Unyielding. Waiting beneath the smoke and soil. As Centralia faded physically, it grew larger in another way, in legend. The story of the burning town captured imaginations far beyond Pennsylvania's quiet hills. Newspapers, television documentaries, books, and later internet forums kept the tale alive, weaving fact with myth. People were fascinated. How could an entire town vanish, swallowed not by flood or war, but by an invisible fire that burned deep beneath the earth? Tourists began trickling into the ruins. They came to see the steaming ground, the cracked highways, the abandoned streets overtaken by trees and grass. Some sought ghost stories. Rumors swirled, whispers that Centralia was haunted. Stories of strange lights at night, of voices heard through the mist. The sulfuric smells and barren landscapes only fed the imaginations of thrill-seekers and urban explorers. Movies and video games found inspiration in Centralia's strange, lonely landscape. Perhaps most famously, the horror video game and film franchise Silent Hill drew heavily on Centralia's atmosphere: abandoned towns, endless mist, eerie quiet, and a hidden, menacing presence beneath the surface. Centralia became a symbol, a place where the line between the real and the surreal blurred. A reminder that entire communities could disappear while the world looked away. But beneath the myths and the ghost stories, the real tragedy of Centralia remained more human, more heartbreaking. It was the story of families forced to abandon homes where generations had lived. Of neighbors divided. Of an entire way of life lost to a mistake no one could undo. It was a reminder that the ground beneath our feet is not as permanent or safe as we like to believe. That sometimes, the greatest dangers are the ones we cannot see, the ones that smolder quietly for years before finally cracking the world open. Centralia's story became a cautionary tale about responsibility, about what happens when environmental problems are ignored or underestimated. It became a symbol of the hidden costs of industrial progress, the legacy left behind by mining, drilling, and reshaping the land without considering the consequences. And yet, even as it grew into legend, the real Centralia, the few homes still standing, the steaming hillsides, the broken streets, remained stubbornly, hauntingly real. A place where memory and myth stood side by side. Where the earth still whispered with heat, and the past was written not just in stories, but in the smoke that rose endlessly from the wounded ground. Today, many visitors who come to Centralia are surprised by how quiet it is. There are no grand ruins, no tourist centers. Just emptiness. A silence broken only by the wind, by the occasional bird call, and by the faint, eerie hiss of steam escaping from the earth. It is, in its own strange way, a place of mourning. And a place of warning. Because Centralia's fire still burns. And the story it tells is one that humanity can never afford to forget. As the years stretched into decades, Centralia's underground fire continued its slow, relentless journey. Scientists who studied the fire estimated that the coal seam beneath Centralia could burn for at least another 250 years, possibly longer. Beneath the surface, the fire gnawed steadily through the rich anthracite deposits, the same resource that had once given Centralia its purpose and prosperity. From time to time, new cracks opened in the earth. New vents hissed sulfurous steam into the chilly Pennsylvania air. New sinkholes yawned open, reminding the few who remained, and the many who visited, that the danger was still real, still alive. Yet, for all its destructive power, the fire moved slowly. It was not a raging inferno seen on the surface. It was an invisible tide, creeping through underground tunnels and seams at a pace of a few yards per year. It consumed homes from below. It rendered fields barren. It poisoned the very air. The state of Pennsylvania continued its policy of slow, patient abandonment. As of the early 2000s, fewer than a dozen residents remained, scattered across a landscape where paved roads ended abruptly, and street signs pointed into empty lots and overgrown woods. In 2013, a legal settlement finally granted these residents the right to live out their lives in Centralia without further government interference. They were the last chapter in a story that had spanned generations. When they are gone, the plan is simple: the remaining structures will be demolished. The land will be reclaimed by the state. And Centralia, as a living town, will officially cease to exist. But the fire will remain. Long after the last house has fallen. Long after the last sign has rusted away. Long after the name Centralia has faded from everyday memory. Deep underground, the coal will continue to burn. A slow, smoldering monument to human carelessness, and to the astonishing resilience of those who refuse to surrender. Today, a handful of visitors still come. Some search for the famous cracks and steam vents. Some leave graffiti behind, scrawling their names on abandoned stretches of highway as a way of saying, "I was here. I remember." Others come seeking something quieter. A moment to stand at the edge of a place where the earth still trembles with heat. A place where the past feels closer, heavier, stitched into the very ground beneath their feet. Centralia's story is not just about a fire. It's about how easily we forget the fragility of the world we build. How invisible forces, whether underground fires or environmental consequences, can undo everything we believe to be permanent. It's about loss, yes, but it's also about memory. The stubborn, beautiful, painful refusal to forget what once stood where now only smoke and silence remain. And as long as the fire burns beneath Centralia, so too will its story, an ember in the great, ongoing history of human resilience and mistake. Today, Centralia is more memory than town. The streets are mostly gone, swallowed by weeds and trees. The buildings are ghosts, erased by time and bulldozers. Only a few scattered houses remain, stubborn outposts clinging to the hillsides like fading embers. But beneath it all, the fire burns on. It is invisible now, for the most part. No longer as dramatic as it once was, fewer steaming vents, fewer visible cracks. But it is still there, deep underground, moving slowly through the coal seams, a hidden river of heat that refuses to die. The people who lived here, who loved this place, have scattered across Pennsylvania and beyond. Some speak of Centralia with sadness. Others with anger. A few with pride in the stubbornness it took to endure, even as the world crumbled around them. Their stories survive in quiet ways. In faded family photo albums showing neat white houses and Sunday picnics. In yellowed newspapers telling of town meetings and church socials. In the memories passed down to grandchildren, stories of a place where the air once smelled of coal smoke and the earth was solid underfoot. Centralia has become more than just a tragedy. It has become a lesson. A reminder that the forces we unleash, whether fire, industry, or ambition, are not so easily controlled. That progress, unchecked, can have consequences that outlive the generations that caused them. That even the strongest communities, the ones bound by blood, faith, and stubbornness, can be undone by something as simple as a single careless fire. It is also a reminder of resilience, of people who refused to be driven away until there was no other choice. Of families who built something from nothing and, even after everything, carried the spirit of Centralia with them into new lives, new towns, new futures. And finally, it is a reminder of memory. Because Centralia has not vanished. It lingers. In the stories we tell. In the cautionary tales passed down to those who think the earth beneath them is unchanging. In the silent steam that sometimes rises from the hills when the temperature drops just right, and the buried fire breathes upward through the cracks. It is a place of ashes and echoes. A town not lost to war or disaster in a single moment, but slowly, painfully, year by year, swallowed by a fire no one could stop. Centralia reminds us that even the quietest, most overlooked places have stories worth telling. Stories of dreams and mistakes. Of endurance and surrender. Of life and loss, and the strange, stubborn hope that somehow, somewhere, a spark of memory will endure. And as long as the fire burns beneath those empty fields, Centralia's story, the story of a town that refused to be forgotten, will burn too. And that was the story of Centralia, a place where stubbornness met disaster, where resilience stood against an unstoppable fire, and where memory clings to the quiet hills long after the last house falls. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear, what would you have done if Centralia had been your home? Thank you for being with us tonight. Stay curious, stay thoughtful, and we'll see you in the next story.